If you practice this one quality of being in your life consistently, it will unlock the potential to have massive influence with your kids, and more importantly, you're going to feel better. So what is it? Here's the big reveal. It's called being authentic. Now, okay, I know what you're probably doing. Some of you may have rolled your eyes like, I know, being authentic, Jonathan, I get it. You just be honest and you share and you just put yourself out there. And it's like, yeah, kind of, but it's also authenticity has some certain, I would call sub-qualities as a part of it that I think are really important to talk about. So the first one that I would talk about that's inside of authenticity is being honest. So what does that mean? It means that as I'm practicing being aware of myself and noticing how I feel on a moment-to-moment basis throughout my day, I'm not analyzing myself, I'm just becoming aware, that I'm honest with myself about it. If I feel like, maybe I'm going to be clear that I feel with myself, right? I might even, in the appropriate relationships, share that I feel like that with people in my life. It might be with a coworker, it might be with a friend, it might even be with my kids, your kids, right? So being authentic with ourselves means being honest. And firstly, being honest with ourselves, and secondly, being honest with another person. Being honest means being vulnerable. Even if we're feeling angry or frustrated or resistant or irritated, there is a way to share these qualities with people in a way that you are being vulnerable. In fact, the best way I've found that people communicate feeling angry or irritated is from the place of vulnerability. Now, how might you ask, can you be vulnerable if you're angry? You'll find your way if you want to. I don't know how to describe that. It's something that I'm okay at doing. I was going to say pretty good, but I don't know that I am actually pretty good at doing that. Because when I'm feeling irritable, I know for myself, I just want to share less. I want to retreat. And if I'm being really honest, I just want to judge the other person or the situation that I'm in about how they're wrong and I'm right. Something that really justifies me feeling irritable. I've found the breakthrough moment and how I can shift feeling, in this case, irritable, is being vulnerable. And it often feels like, right? It often feels like the last thing you want to do is be open. But I found that it's the most important thing to do in that moment if I actually want to shift how I'm feeling. If I want to step down from my pedestal of righteousness around why I'm irritable or frustrated and actually create some, one, shift my own experience, and two, create a semblance of connection in that moment. The only way to do that is to stop pushing everyone away, to stop judging everyone about how they're wrong and I'm right conveniently, which again just justifies my own irritability, and actually be humble enough to admit that I'm having an experience that I don't really like about myself, right? So let's get back to that's all about being authentic. And in fact, for me, that is the key to being authentic, is being that vulnerable. I mean, I could have just shared all of that with you in a way that didn't have that sense of openness or vulnerability with you, in which case I could just have talked about irritability for a while, which is honestly what I was planning on doing. But it made sense to bring in that quality of vulnerability because that's when we really unlock the ability to have influence with others and shift our own experience. So being authentic. Number one, we're being honest. We're being clear, and as clear as we can. We're practicing clarity with ourselves about how we actually feel in the moment, and then when appropriate, do that with other people. Two, we're bringing in this quality of vulnerability into how we feel. Now let's talk about vulnerability for a second. Vulnerability doesn't always mean being soft, being meek, being, I don't know what other qualities, like, I'm so open, I'm so this. Like I said in my irritability example, you can be vulnerable while experiencing really any type of emotion. I'm scanning my world to think if there's any emotion that I can imagine that is less impactful or impossible to have with being vulnerable, and I don't really think that there is. So the anatomy of authenticity has honesty and vulnerability inside of it. If I can be honest and vulnerable, then I have the potential to be authentic in the most helpful kind of ways. The third quality that I'm going to talk about with you around authenticity is humility. I just kind of went into it naturally, right? So humility means that I'm not necessarily right and you're not necessarily wrong. And in fact, if I'm feeling like there's a right and a wrong here, or a wrong and a right here, then I'm not actually connected to anybody. It's impossible, I would say, to be connected with somebody if I think I'm right and they're wrong, or they're right and I'm wrong. The latter there, you're right, I'm wrong, that kind of diminishes myself. And that's actually not humility. That's what we call false humility. Humility means that I can be courageous enough to be open and wrong and right, and it doesn't even really matter, right? That I'm humble, that I don't diminish my strengths necessarily, that I can look at myself as having strengths and weaknesses. For example, for me, one of my strengths is that I'm courageous enough to be vulnerable with a group of strangers here on this video, right? That's one of them. One of my weaknesses is that I procrastinate and delay. And I think, even in the most important moments of connections of people in my life, I'm not authentic when I should be, or let's say when I could be. And what I mean is that I'm not authentic in the times that I really wish that I was. So clearly, I'm working on that, right? I'm developing myself. I'm in the practice of it. But I'm practicing looking at more and more what my strengths and my weaknesses are. And in that way, I'm practicing being humble. I would never say that I'm a humble person, because if I'm a humble person, that means that I've stopped being humble, right? That I've stopped being willing to see when I'm not humble. That makes up humility, right? So start to embody these, start to practice these in your relationships, especially in the relationship with your kids. If I go back and I look at the thousands of families that I've worked with over these last 23 years at this point, and I've looked at the parents who have the most influence, meaning the parents whose kids think of themselves with reverence. They think of their parents like, you know what? They're really good people. Parents, they probably, most of the time, they don't say that they're good parents, because that would mean that the boundaries that they hold, they would appreciate, the kids appreciate, and they don't. Nor should they, nor do they need to, I should say. But the kids who have parents who they talk about in the way, and they say, they're just good people, and they've told me that. When I look at them, they have this, they embody authenticity in the honesty, the vulnerability, and the humility that we're talking about. And the last thing that I'll say that in this definition of authenticity that we can, if we practice embodying, has the potential to unlock massive potential in our relationships, is to do something when we're not feeling the way we want to, right? And that doing something might actually mean doing nothing. Which is sort of what I was practicing today. I was feeling kind of low this afternoon. I had this wonderful morning that, was kind of idyllic, actually. I woke up, kind of slept in a little bit till about 7 or 8 for me. I have this cold plunge downstairs that I went and did. I went to this yoga class, hot yoga class, like sweat and stretched. Then I went out to, God, this sounds like an amazing morning, actually. I went out and saw my friend who was at the beach, who's visiting in town. We went swimming in the Gulf of Mexico here in Naples. We went out to brunch together, had this wonderful connection and conversation about this trip to Egypt we just went on. And I came home and I was just faced with feeling lonely, right? I just felt kind of like, what? There's nothing to do. It's Sunday afternoon. What am I going to do today? I know I said I was going to do a video, but I don't really want to. I'm not really feeling inspired. So I laid around. I eventually called a friend for a little bit, connected with them. Then I took a nap. Then I felt even less motivated to do this thing. But then I did it. And I got here and I started talking to you and sharing with you. And I'm feeling a lot better, right? So this fourth quality of being authentic is doing something, even though there are compelling reasons not to do that thing. And what I mean by something is doing that thing that you know will help you feel better, that will help you uplift or shape your life in the way that you want to. And you know what I'm talking about. I probably don't have to give you too many examples because you know what it is for yourself. For me, that's doing things like this that are courageous and vulnerable, right? That are practicing courage and practicing vulnerability. So do something. Take some kind of action. Don't give up. Don't just go under the proverbial covers and avoid. Be courageous. And while you're being courageous, be authentic, be honest, be vulnerable, be humble, and do something. Take some kind of courageous action that's going to have you feel the way you want to feel, be the way you want to be. And I can guarantee you, if you practice this over time, more and more of your relationships will start to shift. If your sole focus right now is having more influence with your child, great. But don't make that the hallmark of why you're doing these things. Do it for you. Anyway, it's been great spending this time with you. I wish you well and all my best.